Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of College Planning Tip of the Week. I'm Nancy Steenson with Steenson College Coaching, and with me today, as always, is my colleague, Jack Wang. So, Jack, I have parents come to me. It's not uncommon for them to say they have a very limited budget, but their son or daughter has very big dreams. How would you advise families like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nancy. Thanks. This is about some expectations, and I'll get that question as well. And oftentimes I'll hear parents say, well, we want our son or daughter to have a stake in the game in paying for college, which I personally think is a good idea. Then as an extension of that, I'll often hear things like, well, we're willing to pay $10,000 a year, but if little Johnny or little Sally goes to a school that's more than $10,000 a year, then they're responsible for the rest, right? And that's a very logical, rational train of thought that has no hope of working in reality in most instances. So let's just take an extreme case. Okay. Let's suppose that the parents say to the student, hey, we'll chip in $10,000, but the rest of it's on your own. And little Johnny or little Sally applies to a school that's $70,000. And let's just, for the sake of argument, let's also just say that there's no additional aid, there's no merit scholarships, whatever. So in the parents' mind, they're going to be on the hook for 10,000, and Johnny has to figure out the other 60,000. Well, here's the problem: Johnny can't figure out the other 60,000, right? In most instances, yeah, I suppose they can apply for scholarships and everything else, and that's all well and good, and of course that will help. But for most families in this situation, usually then comes down to borrowing. And there is no lending institution in their right mind anywhere in the United States that will lend an 18-year-old with no full-time work history and no credit history that kind of money unless they have a cosigner. But of course, the cosigner is back to the parents, which now makes the parents on the hook for the whole thing. So if Johnny has to borrow the $60,000, then if you really think about that, the parents are really on the hook for the whole 70, right? The 10 that they're willing to chip in, plus the 60 that they have to co-sign, right? Because certainly Johnny's not going to be able to make payments on it because he's in school. It's not realistic to have that kind of expectation. Again, it sounds great, right? It sounds great to tell yourself that, hey, this is what we're going to happen. I want my kid to work for it. Awesome. I get that. Doesn't have a chance of working because it just doesn't work that way, right? Now, the federal government will allow little Johnny or little Sally to borrow some money, but those amounts are very limited in the undergraduate years. So for example, for freshman year, the most that a student can borrow themselves is 5,500. So in my hypothetical example, that's still a long way off from being able to cover that ultimate bill.
So, Jack, what can parents do?
The solution to this issue is really having realistic expectations. So first is understanding what it is that you can afford as a family, right? So in that example, perhaps it is the $10,000. But then once you know that, build a college list, right? When you do the college search for around that number, right? So look at schools where that might cost $70,000 but give a lot of aid to get you down to the 10,000, or look at schools that have a much lower sticker price and gives out aid to get you to that 10,000, whatever the case may be. Or look at other options, maybe like community college. But you want to build that college list and focus your energy and applying to the schools that are realistic, that you can realistically afford. So you're not potentially having to borrow a lot of money and as parents being on the hook for all of that.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Jack. Thank you very much. And thank you all for listening this week on College Planning Tip of the Week. And we'll see you next week.